said, be curious, not judgmental. I like that.
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is for June 27, 2024. My name is Bernie Burns. Sitting right over there, recently under arrest for her attempted coup of Bolivia. It's Ashley Burns. How you doing, Ash?
I was gonna, and then I changed my mind.
Just decided, nah, not today. So this is breaking news for us. We're just basically going to read you the headline on this one because by the time you wake up, the information will be a lot more solid and there'll be breaking news for you, I'm sure. So right off the AP News, Ashley, I got a breaking news. A little red banner came down, so you know it's legit, right?
Very.
So a Bolivian general has been arrested after apparent attempted failed coup as government faces new crisis. And I'll read you the lead in here. Led by a top general vowing to, quote, restore democracy, armored vehicles rammed the doors of Bolivia's government palace Wednesday in what the president called a coup attempt, then quickly retreated, the latest crisis in the South American country. Okay.
Wow. Here's what I don't understand.
Go ahead.
So from what I read of this, this coup, they had taken over several like city plazas and things like that, and then someone rams an armored vehicle into I'm going to call it the palace.
We've all been there. Rush hour traffic. You're in your armored vehicle. You drive by the palace every day. One day you just lose it. You're like, you know what? Fuck it. You ram, hit it, and then you're like, what am I doing? I got to get to work. Go back on patrol.
Good thing this thing is armored. Otherwise, I might have left a dent.
We've all been there.
But it's weird to me that it's like you would go that far and then all we hear is like, oh, that it didn't work out.
Do you know what this reminds me of?
What does it remind you of?
This, and I'm sure we've talked about this before. This, to me, is one of the craziest news stories of 2023. It's always interesting to me when you get right to the edge of history and then it just doesn't happen. You know, like if there was a military coup in Bolivia, that's in the history books forever.
Right. But this one didn't quite make it over the line.
This is like a traffic write-up somewhere, right? In some report that some cop has to file, that somebody rammed the police doors. But in 2023, in the summer of 2023, well into the war between Russia and Ukraine, part of the Russian forces was the Wagner private military group. Which
yes, heard a lot about them for a while.
Don't even get me started on that. Private military is interesting. But, there's basically this group of for-hire mercenaries that Russia had hired in order to help them with their invasion of Ukraine. I almost said Iraq there. Did you ever see that clip with George W.?
What clip?
Where he's at some speech, he's talking and he's condemning the invasion of Ukraine. And he says, this unjustified invasion of Iraq, Ukraine.
What?
It was quite Freudian. Anyway,
wow.
Suddenly in the middle of all this, the Wagner group does this U-turn and then just starts heading for Moscow. And it was a 6-hour period. It was really before America woke up. The Wagner military group was going to have a coup on Vladimir Putin.
Well, we don't even know 100% what the goal was. We knew that they were headed for Moscow, and then didn't they say that the Russian military were digging up roads to try to slow them down?
I don't even know that it was the military. It might have been the equivalent of police forces because the military was spread so thin, which was part of the story. Because behind the front lines there was no defenses, and suddenly there's this convoy heading for Moscow. And they were getting construction equipment and digging up freeways, digging up the asphalt to slow down this convoy.
So then the Wagner group's heading for Moscow, and then they just weren't.
And then it just stopped.
And then the leader got on a plane and left.
Right. And then died on a plane months later.
Theoretically.
Yeah,
Get out your conspiracy hats, Bernie. How do you know that it was actually him?
I don't know.
Did they get his teeth?
I have no idea. All I know, he's on a plane. And the plane went down, and that's all that happened. It was one of those crazy stories that, we'd live in a different world today if that had completely played out.
It was a very strange thing to be happening at the time. Do you remember? There was that's a weird thing that almost happens, but there's also the did happens that were sort of caught in a very weird way, right?
I know. I think I know what you're talking about. I was thinking about that this morning as well.
Yes. So there was in Myanmar, there was this like fitness instructor. And she was doing a video for the internet, for YouTube or something. And so she's out in like a public park next to a road doing this fitness routine. And behind her, suddenly there's this convoy of vehicles headed for the Capitol. And what she captured in the background of her fitness video was a military coup.
Yeah, it was years ago. I had predicted on the Rushi podcast that there would be some major world event that was captured by dash cam, because so many videos at that time were coming out were like Russian dash cams, and there was a meteor that was captured.
That was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty quickly after that. But to me, that prediction was made because that was what I could see as being ubiquitous, constantly recording cameras everywhere. Even working in internet media, I couldn't predict that people would be recording everywhere all the time with their camera phones. But this lady, it's really like the dichotomy of modern life, where she's in the background, she's doing her little and a 2 and a 3, and she's doing this move, and she's doing the chest. I'm not even sure what the chest move is. I see this in a lot of like Asian fitness videos. They're just doing like they like hump their stomach out and their chest like that. I don't know what that does. I'm actually worn out doing that though, so maybe it does something.
Whatever it does, it's effective.
Yeah, it's working. It's working.
But it's interesting. Like that lady's going to be in history books or whatever the future medium of history is. She's going to be in, some sort of like future history stuff. Just accidentally doing her fitness for all time.
Listen, man, life comes at you fast. 1 second you're a Pilates instructor. The next thing you're a war correspondent.
Just like, look, if you want to get your military going, you're going to need to be fit.
Didn't even know.
Lift it.
Didn't even know it was going to happen.
But speaking of the language of the times, Bernie, Inside Out 2 has passed another milestone.
What's this one?
It has now passed $800 million at the global box office, and it has entered the top 10 all-time animated films by box office performance.
So it's top 10 animated films all time by box office. So actually, the drop today, which was from Ted Lasso about be curious, not judgmental. I actually used that because when we were talking about Inside Out earlier, Inside Out, the first one, and I was saying like nobody really talks about this movie. It's not something when people name Pixar movies, they name Inside Out really quickly. I got a lot of feedback on that. And I also got some feedback on Rocky Horror Picture Show because I said it was in the classification of like something that came out and it wasn't well received. It was bad, when it came out. But then over time, it became a cultural phenomenon.
Sure.
And there were people saying in the subreddit, Rocky Horror Picture Show is not a bad movie. It's a great movie. I enjoy it greatly. My comment wasn't to make anyone feel bad about something they like.
Look,
or Inside Out.
I enjoy Rocky Horror Picture Show as well. But it's a specific like type of movie, right? And there's a lot of different types of movies, including types of movies that some people will look at and go, I don't understand.
I don't think there are any bad movies. I don't. I think if a group of people get together to tell a story, I think that's a really cool thing and it's art. And I don't think there is any bad art. Like The Room, for example, in these modern times, I think people would say that The Room is a bad movie and they're choosing to enjoy it. But if you go in and you watch The Room and you have a great time, that's it. Mission accomplished. Job is done. And there are people who very much enjoy The Room. And I'm happy for them. Like the Cybertruck, there are people who enjoy their Cybertruck, I'm sure. I'm saying that while laughing. But over time, it will take on a different cultural meaning to a greater group of people, I think. Like people will look back at this time fondly. Like, remember how easy we had it in 2024, Ashley?
Oh, boy.
Now here we are in 2030.
Remember the good old days?
Yeah, when we didn't have to fill power quotas and things like that. We didn't even know about those in 2024.
Right. Get back on your treadmill. We need to generate some power and it's dark out.
Yeah, exactly. Look, get out there and do your fitness. These coups aren't going to run themselves.
Yeah, so it's interesting. This got me looking up really the top 10 highest grossing animated movies.
What is the highest grossing animated movie of all time? I'm going to guess Snow White.
Frozen 2.
Frozen 2. Wait, Frozen 2?
Yes. So right behind it is Frozen. But as we looked through its overall box office run, Frozen 2 did surpass Frozen, but largely on the back of the phenomenon that was Frozen, if that makes sense. Like, if Frozen 2 came out as a standalone, I don't think it would have necessarily hit number one. But it was following on the wild runaway success of Frozen, and then built upon that to become the juggernaut that was Frozen 2.
Well, we were comparing Frozen 2's opening to Inside Out 2's opening.
Yes.
And then the comparison that we drew was between Inside Out and Frozen.
Right.
The ones.
And so really what we're saying here is that Inside Out 2 could potentially be on track to replace Frozen 2 as the number one animated movie of all time.
Right. So now we're all on Inside Out 2 watch. Like, where is this thing going to land all-time box office? We know from previous announcements that it's going to be in theaters for at least 100 days. Or
Right.
maybe 20 into that?
Yeah, so they said that I think 100 days is the minimum amount of time that it's going to be exclusive to theater. So it's not going to come out on streaming until September.
So it's got a good long runway to try to beat Frozen 2. And on Wikipedia, it says Frozen 2 released in November of 2019. So when you're looking at the box office performance of something today, like Inside Out 2, the question is always, in the modern box office, can this do as well as something that was in, the previous world,
The old times.
And Frozen 2 was pre-COVID. I mean, it was like pre-COVID. It was like right there. When do you think you stopped watching stuff? Like, what would you pick as the month when you said, I'm not going to theaters?
March.
Because it probably wasn't January.
It was March or April.
Right. So it had a full run in theaters before people were like, hey, this flu's getting kind of serious.
Yeah, it had a full holiday season burning.
Yeah. I would say like for mid-February, I think people were starting to really kind of look at it. But that's how close it was. This is like Indiana Jones, like running for the door with the idol in his hands and like sliding under the door as it's closing. And then he reaches back in the hat. That's Frozen 2. The hat is like, yoink, that's Frozen 2 getting its full box office run, essentially.
So I guess now what we'll be looking at is to see where Inside Out 2 ends up on this list of highest grossing animated movies of all time, because its predecessor is not on that list.
Yeah, and a big thing about this too is like when we talk about like numbers and like performance and stuff like that, I want to be really clear. I'm not criticizing Inside Out at all. I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm just saying it wasn't a big part of the popular conversation. And I know that's limited to my experience. You know what I mean? The big thing about it was when I read people's feedback about it was that a lot of them feel it was the first time any movie had really talked about mental health issues. And I think especially for kids' movies, the first time you see something, it feels like it's the first time that it's ever been done before. And I'm not making fun of that or taking away from that in any way whatsoever, because that's important to all of us. That's formative. We all have those experiences in our life. Like when I saw Pulp Fiction as a young man, I was like, nobody's ever told a movie like this before. It's like, yes, they have. Like,
Sure.
And it's hard to go back and watch Citizen Kane after you watch Pulp Fiction, because that's not going to be new to you anymore.
Right. It's really similar to how if something is groundbreaking, then there will be a lot of things that take inspiration from it. And then if you see that groundbreaking thing later, it doesn't feel groundbreaking, it doesn't feel new, because to you, that thing happened in another form of media, if that makes sense.
But kids' shows have almost always been, talked about emotions and dealing with bad feelings.
Sesame Street,
Mr. Rogers, all of that. Like all the modern issues, even things like inclusion, you know what I mean? But, kids programming has always, at least in my lifetime, has always been, an exploration of emotion and the self and all of that as well.
Yeah, although this did use sort of like a more modern vernacular.
I agree with you completely. I think this might be the first time it talked about mental health in the way we talk about mental health, using the same terms that we use today.
Yeah,
which is important to people.
In fact, one of those, when we talk about like, you're not sure where something came from, or you're like, oh yeah, this just uses something that I already know. I think a lot of the terms that we use now may have been popularized by Inside Out.
Oh, you think so?
Like it put them into a context that made them a lot easier to understand.
Where do you see like the modern conversation of like the younger generation? Where do you see that mental health conversation generating from?
Oh, I don't really know. Do you?
Really? I think it's like probably because it was a younger social media platform, but I think Tumblr was a lot of that for both good and bad. I think Tumblr was a very influential platform for younger people, especially like between 2010. I don't know when Tumblr started, but the era of like 2010 to 2015.
Right. There was a really specific era for Tumblr, and it was this amazing platform. And then they banned porn. And for some reason, that made this like hyper emotional platform go away. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah, that is interesting. There wasn't like Well, I think it was like maybe it broke the shell of being a safe space, right? For everything.
Maybe.
While we're on the topic of the Wagner Group, remember when OnlyFans tried to pull a 6-hour coup on the adult industry?
I do. They
Same
banned,
kind of thing.
That was what, 24 hours that lasted?
Yeah, they were like,
that?
no more adult content on OnlyFans. And everyone's like, who do you think you are?
Yeah, it's like, then you have no company left.
Yeah, that's what you do.
There's like 3 people over there going, woo.
And then OnlyFans got on a plane and crashed. I'm not sure what happened there. But I want to say, too, while we're talking about the first time that people see something, it's the first time it's happened. I'm sure I've given this example before, but the best example I have in my career to illustrate that is my old buddy, Matt Hullum. He made a blog post on the front page of the Rooster Teeth website because we used to do a blog post with like every video. Matt never wanted to do them. Like we all had to do them. Like it was just part of our release procedure. And so Matt did one where he was releasing a video, but he just flew back from Denver, and boy, are my arms tight. He made that joke.
Classic.
And the top comment on there was, nice South Park reference, was the person made the comment. Because that was the first time that person had heard that joke, so they thought it was a South Park joke.
Oh,
right.
Yeah, okay.
And once again, I'm not taking away from this. It's like, you can't watch everything. You know what I mean? So sometimes the things that make their way into our cultural conversation, the first time, somebody young hears about them, it's still important, and it's important. That's why you keep saying those things. If things start to feel repetitive sometimes, it's because they're still important to all of us, and still important for young people to learn.
Still new to somebody. No,
but I can assure you that joke, the first person who ever stepped off a plane made that joke.
The Wright brothers were making that joke, okay?
Right, exactly. There was planes, and then that joke. That's the timeline of invention there. Oldest joke in the world.
What? Probably like air balloons, they were making that joke.
Well, I want to, may I, while we wrap up, I'm sure you have some sponsors we want to talk about.
I do.
I want to give a special shout out to someone who has made my morning great today. That's you, Ashley. Because
what? Little old me.
Ashley, we now have to drive an hour and a half for an appointment that Ashley decided to make the day after everyone left the house.
You're lucky I didn't make it before everyone left the house, Bernie, and use that to just escape pod.
So today we're back in the car traveling to Aberdeen again to meet this appointment, and then we'll be coming back. So another crazy morning for us.
You're very, very welcome.
But at least I get to be in the car with you.
I'd also like to thank our sponsors for today, Hunter Clark and good old Scottish boy Adam, for sponsoring this episode of Morning Somewhere at patreon.com/Morning Somewhere.
Just go to Morning Somewhere. Just go to the internet, yell at your browser, Morning Somewhere!
And you'll find it. So thank you both for sponsoring this episode of the show.
First sponsor's name was Hunter?
Hunter Clark.
Hunter. Wow. Nice Halo reference, parents. That's very good. All right. Well, that does it for us today, June 27th, 2024. We will be back to talk to you tomorrow. We hope you will be here as well.
Bye, everybody.